This recording was produced by Oregon Trail Baptist Church. If you'd like to get more recordings, or to leave your feedback, please visit us at www.otbchurch.com or write us at P.O. Box 298, Guernsey, Wyoming 82214. We look forward to hearing from you, and we hope that today's recording will not just challenge your thinking, but will transform your life.
Turn your Bibles, if you would, to Genesis 1. We'll start there this morning. Genesis chapter 1. As we did the Bible reading this morning, I had a Christmas song, hymn, pop in my head, and I'm curious if anybody else had, from the Isaiah 11 chapter and the Jeremiah passage, with the root and the branch language. Does anybody else have a song, Christmas hymn that came to mind? I'm kind of curious because I don't think many people know this one anymore. Okay. It is not in our hymnal, I'll tell you that much. It is not in Majesty. It is not, I don't think, in Soul Stirring. I'm not sure. It's in some old Baptist hymnals. I do know that much. I'm just seeing how long it takes to... I'll give it to you eventually. Okay. Well, I had to look it up myself. Lo, how a rose ere blooming. Has any of you heard of that hymn? Lo, how a rose ere blooming. It's not sung very often. The tune is from the 1600s, but it looks like it was written early 1900s. I do. It's Lo, how a rose ere blooming from tender stem hath sprung, of Jesse's lineage coming, of as men of old have sung. It came a flower bright amid the cold of winter, when half gone was the night. Verse 2. Isaiah 'twas foretold it, the rose I have in mind, with Mary we behold it, the Virgin Mother kind. To show God's love aright, she bore to men a Savior, when half gone was the night. Verse 3. The flower whose fragrance tender with sweetness fills the air, dispels with glorious splendor the darkness everywhere. True man, yet very God, from sin and death he saves us, and lightens every load. Seems like there should be another line to that, but anyway, that is the hymn, which I don't know what hymnal has it, so. I don't know. I know I sang it in high school choir. You can't say that! That's the irony. You're not too young to know it. Oh, anyway. It is warm in here. So, I've been doing a Christmas series for several years on the gifts of God. And we're starting this morning in Genesis 1 because several times as we tackle like a topical theme, it seems like so much gets packed right into the opening of Genesis. So I'm just going to read the first 5 verses of Genesis here this morning, and then we'll dive in here this morning. Genesis chapter 1, starting with verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, Let there be light. And there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for your word here this morning. As we seek to hear from your word, Lord, we want it to change us. We want you to change us. We want to conform more to your image and Christ-likeness. I ask that you would open our hearts and minds to truth as we consider some thoughts from your word here this morning. In your Son's name, amen. Now, in the back of your mind, you probably have the text we just read a little bit. But what is something we all spend or trade or use, but you cannot touch, or you can never check its balance? Time. You guys are right on the spot. You know, we have tons of expressions when we refer to time, do we not? We talk about beating the clock, or turning back the hands of time, or we talk about, I'm just going to kill some time. We use expressions like once in a blue moon, or man, so-and-so is behind the times. Time flies when you're having fun. We talk about wasting time. We talk about hitting the big time. Or we might say time is money. Now, this is a series on the gifts of God, and I got to give credit to where credit's due. Part of what threw the thought process of this into the sermon was a chapter from C.S. Lewis that we read in Screwtape letters. So some of you are already clued into maybe where I'm going with this, and that's okay. But let's start by looking at time. Here in Genesis, right at the beginning, God is the creator of time. Now, it's hard for us to think outside of time, is it not? At one point in time, I'm standing on this side of the platform. I cannot stand here and there at the same time. So there's a passage of time which I move over here, right? I mean, it's hard for us to imagine a time, a place, where that is not the case. But somehow in God's wisdom, and he says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And with that, he created time. And he created the beginning of time, but he will also end time. It's interesting, it says, in the beginning. Well, beginning, you can't have a beginning without some sort of an ending. Now, I guess some things have begun that haven't ended yet, but we think of all things as having beginning and ending. We might call that a lifespan. It may not just refer to human life, but when you build a machine or you work with a tool, you expect it to wear out over time. If it's cheap, it will wear out soon. If it's a well-quality, well-taken care of tool, it'll last a long time. So God creates time right from the beginning. Here in the opening of creation, he creates time, he creates space, he creates matter, and all those things are tied together, and the scientists in their community can tell you about how all those tie together, and they still debate on how they all tie together. That's not our point here this morning. But what does God do after creating the world? Or in verses 1 and 2, we have the broad overbrush of the creation. But in verses 3 to 5, God makes light. But then what does he make to go with that light? The second thing God creates. He creates light and dark, and then what? He calls it here, God saw the light that it was good. He divides it from the light and darkness. God calls the light day, and the darkness he calls night. The evening and the morning are the first day. So here, with light and dark, we're starting to hear the sounds of what? Cycles. It's daytime, it's nighttime. By the time we get several more verses down, what does God create for us that are signs of the times? We have the sun, the moon, and the stars. Now, the sun is fairly simple. We see the sun rise with the beginning of day. We see the sun set. It's, in a sense, the end of the day. The moon may not be as common to us, but historically, what if people used the moon to help tell them? Yeah, the seasons and the time. They talk about, moon days, or, we had an old clock, and what is a moon? It's like on every 28 days or something, the cycle of the moon, and I'm not really into all that, so I could be off, and I don't care that I'm off. Somebody can correct me. But the moon tends to cycle a little bit more with our months, and people use that to tell time and seasons. And yet, beyond that, Throughout history, people have looked at the stars to tell time. Now, once every 4 years, what happens on our calendar? We have a leap year. Did you know that the Egyptians had that figured out? About the time that Abraham was in Egypt, but a little bit sooner. They called it a Sothic cycle, and instead of every 4 years having a leap year where they take a day and we add it, or we take a day away from the calendar, right, in a leap year. Help me out here, because I don't pay a lot of attention to calendars. Okay, yeah, I'm getting a yes. Well, in the Sothic cycle, they took a full year out every 1,040 some years. Well, they figured that out, and they were watching the stars. They would take a full year off their calendar to make account for this. So God gave us the sun, moon, stars. He created time. And with his time, he's also imprinted, before I get there, there seems to be hints in passages that time will end. We have in Zechariah 14, here it's looking for the day of the Lord, and it says, "But it shall be one day, which shall be known to the Lord, not day nor night, but it shall come to pass that at eventime it shall be light." Now in Revelation 22 we read, and I don't have it on the screen for you, "And there shall be no night there," referring to the new heaven and new earth. "They need no candle, neither light of the sun, for the Lord God giveth them light. And they shall reign forever and ever." How time will work in the new heaven and new earth, I'm not going to pretend to know. I just don't know. I do know God has it under control. But God has also set patterns to time. How many days did it take for God to create the world? 7. Did God need to take 7 days? Now, technically it was 6, and there was a day rest. Okay, I get it. But why 7? Why is it that every culture around the world has a week of 7 days? Historically, they've tried other weeks. During the French Revolution, they tried a 10-day work week. Didn't go so well. All right, even the animals and the horses and they didn't fare so well with a 10-day week. But why 7s? Somehow, all around the world, a week is a week. And we measure time fairly similar to the same. But we see that right in part of what's happening in Genesis 1 and 2 is this emphasis on the 7th day. And in Genesis 2:2 we read, "And on the 7th day God ended his work which he had made, and he rested the 7th day from all the work which he had made." So here's this cycle of a weekly pattern that God is the one who created this. And we live in and through that. We also see monthly cycles. Paul makes slight reference to this in Colossians. He says, "Let no man therefore judge you in meat or drink or in respect of holiday or of the new moon or of the Sabbath days." Okay, now the new moon is a way, sometimes they would refer to like months. Okay, so they had months of the year. And we have a Hebrew calendar with their months of the year, and they don't overlap with our months and things of that nature, but they would measure things this way. And in Leviticus, we have the Day of the Lord and the Day of Atonement, and they make reference to Israel's sins being atoned for once a year. Where do you think this idea of months and years and days came from? God created time. God created the patterns of time. And we live within those patterns whether we acknowledge it or not. And even though God created it, on top of that, God rules over and in, and his rule extends to time in our lives. Did any of you control when you were born? Do you really have control when you die? You might say, well, if I commit suicide. Yeah, well, not everybody who tries to commit suicide is successful. Okay? You don't always have control of everything you think you have control of. I was reading a sermon connected to this idea from the old preacher Albert Barnes. And he was talking about how as young people, we think we're invincible. We don't think about time ending. We naturally think we're going to have a long life and we have a life to spend, and we don't think about eternity. We don't think about those things because we just assume, I'm happy, I'm healthy, life will go on. In the back of our mind, we know that, well, this young person just passed away, but that was a freak accident, or this happened here. But we think of ourselves as having time. But do we really? You see, the time is in God's hands. He knows what's happening more than we ever will. As we get older in years, we might recognize, I don't have much time left. Or I need to value my time. I need to make good use of my time. In Psalms, we read, teach us to number our days. And that expression is from Psalm 90, verse 12. So teach us to number our days that we may apply our hearts to wisdom. We do recognize we only have so much time. I don't think anybody expects that they'll live forever in this life. Yes, we will in eternity with glorified bodies, and we'll live forever with the Lord if we're born again believer. But we don't expect to live forever in this life. And do you really want to? Let's be honest. The older we get, the more parts break down. And it's not like the parts store where they can just be replaced. My wife has a new hip, and it's amazing. But they can't do that with every part, can they? And so we kind of long for the day when our bodies are not breaking down and where our energy is not constantly being sucked and we're not constantly living in pain. In Barnes' sermon, he proposes one of the reasons that God doesn't tell us when we're going to die is that if we knew when we would die, it would be a bleak existence. He illustrates it this way. If God told you your son is going to die this year on, let's say, January 31st, your son will die. How do you think you'll look at your son at each meal you have? Sure, you might live and do things with them that are special. And sometimes we experience that now where the doctors say we don't know how long, but we don't think this person has long. But if you know with certainty this person's going to die soon, there'd be kind of a dark cloud overhanging. You know they're dying this year. And you wouldn't always be able to live in the vitality of life and the goodness of life, of experiencing life with that loved one. And so maybe he's on to something there in that if you know for sure when you're going to die, you might take things advantage in some ways that maybe you should not, and you might have a bleak view of life. But there is an element here where we should learn to number our days. Not that we know exactly how many days we have, but we should live carefully. James says in the New Testament, he says in James 4, go to now, ye that say, today or tomorrow, we will go into such a city. We will continue there a year, and buy and sell, and get gain. Whereas ye know not what shall be on the morrow. For what is your life? It is even a vapor that appeareth for a little time, and then vanisheth away. For that ye ought to say, if the Lord will, we shall live and do this and that. But now you rejoice in your boastings. All such rejoicing is evil. It's interesting in this passage of James, he's talking about these merchants who they're planning to. This is our yearly plan. We've got a laid out business model. What are we going to do? We're going to go to this place and we're going to buy and we're going to sell. We're going to do all these things. Now again, going back to the Psalms, with knowing and measuring and counting our days, these businessmen are doing that, but they're doing it with what missing? An acknowledgement that their time is not their own. It's up to God. Will they even make it to the city? Will they last there a year? Will they make it a month? They don't know. They have no idea how long they'll be there. And that's James gets to this point. He says, for they ought to say in verse 15, if the Lord will, this is our plan, to live and to do this and that. We have no idea what tomorrow holds, but God knows what tomorrow holds for each of us. And God may desire to lead and guide us through the daily decisions of life. And if we knew what tomorrow held, we may not do some of the things today that we ought to do. If we knew what tomorrow held, we may just throw up our hands and say, yep, forget that. And so there's this element, God holds time in His hand. It's something we can't control, we can't change, we can't determine. Of course, we have to measure it. We live by it. We all have clocks we check. I'm looking at one in the back now. Okay? But God is in control of time. And if God is the creator of time, and God controls time, it leads to another element here. And this is really the thought that got me going. And I went backwards instead of forwards. And that's not it either. The time we have is a gift from God. The time that we have is a gift from God. This is the idea from C.S. Lewis's book, Screwtape Letters, that really just impressed me in the last several weeks. And as I was thinking, we're entering back into the sermon series on gifts from God. And what's another gift from God that we can cover? This came back to my mind as I was thinking on this. Lewis is not the only one to recognize it. In fact, in one of my Bible dictionaries, they have a little blurb here that says, Bible theology is bound up with ordinary, everyday time. Everyday time is viewed as a gift from the Creator. The markers of time, such as the sun, moon, and stars, are signs of God's goodness and generosity. The cycles of time are ongoing and dependable. Through them, people can revere God and enjoy all aspects of life. For example, work is successful if it is done within the time parameters set by God. And sleep is a gift to those whom God loves. So Lewis is not the only one to connect the idea that time as a gift is something God has given us. And James himself says, not specifically of time as a gift, but he says every good gift and every perfect gift is from above and cometh down from the Father of lights, with whom is no variableness, neither shadow of turning. It's interesting, as he's talking about gifts, he's pulling in imagery of the planets revolving and turning and moving and causing shadows. The very planets that, part of that helps us tell the times and the seasons, the days, the months, and the year. If time is a gift from God, how do you treat a gift? We would be offended if you gave somebody something and they threw it to the ground and they ignored it. They disregarded it. Sometimes it's kind of a funny thing, but sometimes people will get offended. They'll give you a gift that you have no use for. You know what I'm talking about? You're trying to figure out what this thing is. You don't care to have it. You don't want it. You don't. My kids are all in the back today, so this is probably good. They're all trying to buy me a Christmas present. And I love my kids. But yesterday, John was in Menards. Like, Daddy, do you need this hammer? Not really. Daddy, how about this? Not really. They have no idea what I need or want, and then they have a budget that is much smaller than mine, okay? And so I value the thought. I value the desire. I value that, but at the same time, the gift may not get used much if it's not, okay? But if someone who's an adult or someone, if they give you something and you never use it, you disregard it, it's almost offensive, is it not? Now, God has given you and me time. We don't own it. And that's a really important thing to remember. We don't own the time that we have. It's been given to us by God. And what we do with that time matters. And it matters for eternity. I want to read a section from Screwtape Letters, chapter 21. And I just think Lewis really does a good job highlighting some of this. Now, I want to preface this. If you've not read Screwtape Letters or you're unfamiliar with it, C.S. Lewis is using a medium in this book to convey truth. And the medium he's using is an older demon instructing a younger demon how to trip up Christians. Okay? So some of the language sounds really weird to the ear, but Lewis is like turning the tables on their head, trying to get you as a Christian to read this from the perspective and think about, here's some things I need to be careful of. In this letter, Screwtape is the senior demon, is instructing Wormwood, the younger demon, one of the ways to really make sure people latch on to the idea that they own their time. Because if you can get them to latch on to that idea, they won't recognize that time is a gift from God. I will adjust some of the reading here because without reading the whole book, it kind of gets a little odd, and so I'll do my best I can. So here is Screwtape instructing the younger demon, Wormwood. Men are not angered by mere misfortune, but by misfortune conceived as injury. And in the sense of injury depends on the feeling that a legitimate claim has been denied. The more claims on life, therefore, that your Christian can be induced to make, the more often he will feel injured and as a result, ill-tempered. Now you will have noting that things throw him into a certain passion so easily as to, nothing throws him into a passion so easily as to find a track of time which he has reckoned on having at his own disposal, unexpectedly taken from him. And this unexpected visitor, when he, looking forward to a quiet evening, or the friend's talkative wife turned up, when he looked forward to a time with a friend, that throw him out of gear. Now, he's not so uncharitable or slothful that these small demands on his courtesy are in themselves too much for it. They anger him because he regards his time as his own and feels that it's being stolen. And here, as one demon speaking to another, they're prompting him, trying to get him to trip up Christians more. He says, "You must therefore zealously guard in his mind the curious assumption, my time is my own." Let him have the feeling that he starts each day as the lawful possessor of 24 hours. Let him feel as a grievous tax that portion of his property which he has to make over to his employers, and as a generous donation that further portion which he allows to his religious duties. But what he must never be permitted to doubt is that the total from which these delusions have been made was, in some mysterious sense, his own personal birthright. Lewis is saying, keep him in the mindset and control. His time is his own. He can do with it what he wants. And he's emphasizing, let him think that he's being very gracious with his time when he reads his Bible and he prays and he goes to church. He's being so gracious, and then let him loathe the time he has to spend at work and the employer and the things of life. The Screwtape further admonishes Wormwood here. He says, you have a dedicated task. The assumption which you want him, the patient, the Christian he's trying to trip up, to go make is so absurd. If once it is questioned, even we cannot find a shred of argument in its defense. Man can neither make nor retain one moment of time. It all comes to him by pure gift. He might as well regard the sun and moon as his chattels. He is also, in theory, committed a total service, if he's committed in a total service to God, and if God appeared to him in bodily form and demanded that total service even for one day, he would not refuse. He would be greatly relieved if that one day involved nothing harder than listening to the conversation of a foolish woman. And he would be almost relieved, or relieved almost to pitch of disappointment for 1/2 an hour in a day that God said, now you may go amuse yourself. Now, if he thinks about his assumptions for a moment, even he is bound to realize that he is actually in a situation every day. When I speak of preserving this assumption in his mind, therefore, the last thing I mean for you to do is to furnish him with arguments in its defense. There aren't any. Your task is purely negative. Don't let his thoughts come anywhere near it. Wrap a darkness about it, and in the center of that darkness, let his sense of ownership in time lie silent, uninspected, and operative. He goes on later to say, in the same chapter, the sense of ownership in a general way is always to be encouraged. Mind you, this is a demon talking to another demon. Encourage ownership, the idea of mine, this belongs to me. Because humans are always putting up claims to ownership, which sound equally funny in heaven and hell if we must keep them doing so. There is a danger, and Lewis is highlighting this, and it got me thinking on this and reading on this. And oh, it so rings true. You've had a day, You've planned out your week. You've got your things on your schedule. You have something you're planning to do. And then somebody says, I need you to do this. And that has just invaded your time. And you may respond. You may do what's needed. You may reason through, okay, yes, this is important. This needs to happen. Or yes, I made this commitment and I forgot about it. But now you have a spirit of agitation rising within you because you thought your time was yours. You thought you had this time. You thought you could do with this time what you wanted to. And something has infringed on what you thought was yours, forgetting that who made time? God. Who has given you the time you have? God. Who may be taking this opportunity that you may feel is a burden and using it for some purpose to his own ends? God. And so when we take ownership of time, forgetting it is a good gift of God, when we forget that God has given us the time that we have and is precious to us, when we forget that, we become very defensive of our time. In some ways, it may be like a manager at work getting after someone for being on the phone. I'm kind of watched this change over time. Companies used to not allow people to have their phones on the sales floor or whatever. But now you're seeing that companies have given up and they've just, take the app on your phone and use your phone now as a device so we don't have to pay for it and, scan the products or whatever. But we have a problem with someone who's on their phone playing a game or texting or whatever when they're on the job. Why do we have a problem with that? Because, go ahead. Their time at that point is being paid for by the employer, right? And the employer expects them to devote that time to the task at hand. Now, there are some jobs where it's not such a big deal. I was fortunate when I was finishing up grad school, I got a job as a night audit. And I was up front with the manager, and I said, so I'm guessing there's going to be lots of nights where I'm bored stiff, there's nothing to do. I said, is it a problem if I work on homework on those nights? She said, no. As long as this to-do list is done, this cleaning list and the laundry, as long as that's done, I don't care what you do. You just have to be here in case someone shows up at the desk. Well, that's convenient because I was able to get like 6 hours of homework done a night while getting paid for it, okay? But the point is, when we take that ownership of time in our own life, forgetting that God, like an employer, owns our time. When we forget that God is the one who gives us the time we have, in one moment our life is over. God has given us our time. When God allows someone to infringe upon our time, we have no right to be offended. We have no right to bristle, and because time itself is a gift from God. Now, I feel like this morning I've scratched some of the surface of this, and I plan to actually come back and hit a few other aspects of time as a gift from God next week. But let me encourage you here with a few points of application. Do you live as if your time belongs to God? I don't think that means that we completely clear our schedules and never put anything on our schedule because I'm just going to let God lead me. I don't think that's what that means at all. But I think, as James says, we're going to put things on our schedule, but like with that attitude of, if the Lord wills, this is my plan. This is what my task is to accomplish. These are the things I need to get done. And Lord willing, this is what I plan to accomplish. Because if we leave it open-handed, knowing that as we go about doing the right things we ought to do, God delights in leading and guiding in and through those things. It prompts another question for us. How do you spend, there's the language of money again, spend your time? All of us have the same amount of time per day. We actually don't know how much our balance is. None of us know how long we will live. I'm speaking now to everybody who's alive. Nobody's dead here, so you don't know when your time ends yet. But each day, all of us get 24 hours. Each month, we get the same 28, 30, 31 days. We get the same amount of time within a year, but how do we spend it? There's things that call attention to our time that may not call attention to other people's time. There's things that may take we may be slower at than others. But how do we spend our time? And do we spend our time as if our time actually belongs to God? In an employer-employee relationship, this is one of the hard things to communicate. Sometimes you'll get an employee who really wants to do a good job, but they spend so much time on the nitty-gritty details, the big picture job is not getting done. Does that make sense? For instance, when you're pouring concrete, it's work fast, work hard, shovels are flying, things are happening. Why? Well, if that was... You're racing the clock, and once that concrete's set, it's done. We have to do some concrete rework at the house my wife and I bought. And I pulled out the calculator and it said we need 28 bags. My first trip to the store, I got 30 bags. My second trip, I got 15. Why? Because I don't want to be halfway through that job and go, we need a few more bags. You know, whether they didn't quite fill it up enough and so there's more concrete that's there and you don't have enough. Well, you don't want to run out in the middle of the job. So you work as if time matters. Now, that's just simple things. Concrete can be broken up and redone. Not that we like to. But we spend our time. Some of us spend it with electronic devices. Other of us spend it with people. We spend our time working. We spend our time in so many ways. Don't view time as if your time working is somehow not time you can spend with God. Because God's called us to work. He's called us to be productive. He's called us to do things. Some of you are retired and you spend your time in other ways and you may feel you're wasting it. And as your pastor, I'm looking at going, but I see how some of you spend and invest so much time into some of your family members, into some of the things going on in the people's lives around you. That's a good quality spending of your time. But we're in a culture, I think, it's easy for us to waste time. And how do you and I feel or respond when we feel someone has taken our time? When you have that interruption, or this person had this problem happen and you're scratching your head like, yeah, I know, I told you that. I told you your tire was low and you shouldn't have, you kind of get that irritation rising up because this could have been prevented. But that time that you thought was yours, how do you respond when people take your time? Time is a gift from God that each of us have, some more than others. But we all get 24 hours in a day. How will we spend our time? Lord, we thank you for your word here this morning. And as we consider this idea that time is a gift from you, time is a gift that we cannot add to, we cannot even subtract from like we think we can. And yet, it's something you graciously give us every day. Lord, may we not become possessive of our time. May the time we have be held loosely as we try to make the most and do what's best with it, but loosely holding on to it, knowing that you're going to lead and guide us. There's going to be people who need help. There's going to be people who need attention. There's going to be things that enter into our space and our life that require our time. And instead of bristling in our response, may our hearts rejoice that you, in those cases, are leading and guiding us to what we ought to do and how we ought to respond. With heads bowed and eyes closed, as the piano begins to play a hymn of invitation, let me ask you to consider how you think about your time. Have you forgotten that God is the creator of time? It belongs to Him, and what you get is a gift. Lord, this morning as we have considered this aspect of time, something we're so familiar with, it's second nature, and yet something that we easily latch on to as our own, forgetting that our time is simply borrowed, but it is a gift from you. May we live this week as each moment of our time belongs to you, and you've given it to us, and we can be responsible stewards with it and respond appropriately to the gift you've given. We ask this in your Son's name. Amen.